In the vibrant heart of Harlem, New York, a boy named James Baldwin was born in the summer of 1924. He would later rise as a celebrated novelist, essayist, and an unflinching voice of the civil rights movement. Baldwin grew up amid poverty and prejudice in a household anchored by faith. His mother, Emma Jones, married David Baldwin, a Baptist preacher from New Orleans, who became James's strict stepfather when the boy was about 3. As a teenager, James Baldwin briefly followed in his stepfather's footsteps, serving as a fiery young Pentecostal minister from ages 14 to 16. Yet he also discovered salvation in literature. At Frederick Douglass Junior High, his mentor was the poet Countee Cullen of the Harlem Renaissance, and at DeWitt Clinton High School, he honed his writing, editing the school magazine alongside future photographer Richard Avedon. Baldwin was the eldest of a large family, pressed into adult responsibilities early. After graduating high school in 1942, he forsook plans for college to support his 7 younger siblings, taking whatever work he could find. In these years, he encountered daily racism, turned away from restaurants and jobs because he was black, even in the ostensibly liberal North. In 1943, personal tragedy struck when he lost his stepfather to illness, and on the very same day, his mother gave birth to Baldwin's youngest sibling. The backdrop to that loss was a summer of upheaval in Harlem as racial tensions erupted into a local riot. This crucible of poverty, grief, and racial injustice in his early life seared itself into Baldwin's consciousness, later fueling the urgency of his prose. In the mid-1940s, Baldwin found a path out of Harlem's confines through writing. He moved to New York's Greenwich Village, a bohemian refuge for artists, to pursue his craft. There he befriended acclaimed novelist Richard Wright, who helped Baldwin secure a literary fellowship in 1945. That support allowed him to focus on writing, and soon his essays and short stories began appearing in national publications. Still, Baldwin felt stifled by America's racial climate. In 1948, at age 24, he made a dramatic change, departing for Paris on another fellowship to seek creative freedom abroad. Once overseas, Baldwin later recalled, quote, "I see where I came from very clearly. I am the grandson of a slave, and I am a writer. I must deal with both." Living as an expatriate in Europe allowed him to escape the immediate pressures of American racism and reflect on it with fresh clarity. It also gave him space to explore his identity as a gay black man through literature, away from the prejudices he faced at home. By the early 1950s, Baldwin's literary star was rising. His debut novel, Go Tell It on the Mountain, in 1953, drew on his Harlem upbringing and the spiritual wrestling of his youth. He followed with Giovanni's Room in 1956, a groundbreaking story centered on same-sex love, virtually unheard of in mainstream literature at that time. As an openly gay man, Baldwin broke new ground by portraying homosexuality and interracial relationships in his fiction, paving the way for future generations of LGBTQ+ writers. Baldwin, though not a protest organizer on the front lines, became deeply involved in the civil rights movement as an observer, interlocutor, and truth-teller. He returned from France as the movement was gaining momentum in the late 1950s. In 1957, Baldwin traveled through the segregated South for the first time, witnessing Jim Crow society firsthand and meeting Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in Montgomery. He forged friendships with other movement leaders as well, including Medgar Evers and Malcolm X, and lent his voice to the cause through essays, speeches, and interviews. Baldwin's role was to bear witness to the struggle, to articulate the pain and aspirations of Black Americans in terms that could reach the conscience of white America. Then came 1963. That year was a watershed in Baldwin's life and in the civil rights struggle. In the spring of 1963, he published The Fire Next Time, a searing essay warning that America must confront its racial sins or face catastrophic consequences. He wrote, "If we do not falter in our duty now, we may be able to end the racial nightmare," blending prophecy with a sliver of hope. The book became a bestseller, spending weeks among the top titles in the nation and ultimately selling over 1 million copies. That summer, he joined the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, standing alongside 250,000 fellow Americans at the Lincoln Memorial site in demand for equality and justice. He also took the movement's message abroad, leading a civil rights demonstration in Paris in 1963 and brought it into the halls of power. In May 1963, Baldwin and other black activists met with U.S. Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy in a frank and tense discussion, urging the government to act faster on civil rights. By year's end, Baldwin had become not just a literary figure, but a moral witness of the civil rights era, translating the fiery spirit of the streets into words that jarred the nation's conscience. By the late 1960s, Baldwin was thrust into the heart of crushing blows. Many of the friends and heroes with whom he had stood for justice were slain. Medgar Evers was assassinated in 1963, Malcolm X in 1965, and Dr. Martin Luther King, whom Baldwin had grown close to, in 1968. Baldwin himself narrowly escaped danger. He was intended to speak at the Birmingham church on the day it was bombed in 1963, but had missed his flight, a twist of fate that spared him from the attack that killed 4 young girls. Each tragedy weighed on Baldwin's soul. He channeled his grief and fury into his art. The play Blues for Mr. Charlie in 1964 was loosely based on the racially motivated murder of Emmett Till, and his later essay collection No Name in the Street in 1972 grappled with the disillusionment and anger he felt after the tumult of the 1960s. By the end of that turbulent decade, Baldwin's faith that America would heed the call of justice had been deeply shaken. After Dr. King's assassination in 1968, Baldwin left the United States once again, this time settling permanently in the quiet village of Saint-Paul-de-Vence in the south of France. There, in a self-imposed exile, he continued to write and reflect, even as the country he had tried to help transform was convulsed by riots and unrest. Though living abroad, Baldwin never abandoned his role as American witness. At the University of Cambridge in 1965, beneath the carved ceilings of the Union, a debate took place that captured the struggle of an entire century. The debate in question: has the American dream been achieved at the expense of the American Negro? Baldwin, as the African-American voice in the debate, was faced with William F. Buckley, founder of the conservative National Review and defender of the American establishment. The setting itself was a theatre of history. Britain's oldest debating society, once echoing with arguments over empire and monarchy, now hosted a confrontation over the soul of America. The civil rights movement was at its height. Martin Luther King Jr. had led marches from Selma to Montgomery only weeks before. Malcolm X had been assassinated just the year before. In that moment, Baldwin and Buckley were not simply intellectual adversaries, they represented two visions of America.
It comes as a great shock around the age of 5 or 6 or 7 to discover that the flag to which you have pledged allegiance, along with everybody else, has not pledged allegiance to you. It comes as a great shock to discover that Gary Cooper killing off the Indians when you were rooting for Gary Cooper, that the Indians were you. It comes as a great shock to discover that the country, which is your birthplace, and to which you owe your life and your identity, has not in its whole system of reality evolved any place for you.
Baldwin's cadence carried history itself. Slavery's chains, Reconstruction's betrayal, the quiet cruelty of segregated schools and dreams. Each sentence transformed the hall not into a debating chamber, but into a court of conscience. Buckley followed with composure. He spoke for patience, for caution, for faith in the nation's ideals, even as Baldwin had shown how those ideals had been denied to millions. Where Baldwin offered testimony, Buckley offered defense. When the vote was cast, Baldwin's side prevailed by a wide margin. The result was more than a tally. It was a sign of a shifting age, when truth, spoken plainly and painfully, could outweigh the polish of tradition. That night in Cambridge endures because Baldwin's voice was not just argument, it was memory, prophecy, and indictment offered to a world finally ready to listen. His 1985 work, The Evidence of Things Not Seen, examined the Atlanta child murders, probing themes of systemic neglect and racial fear. Even as his fame quieted compared to the 1960s, his voice did not waver. "I am what time, circumstance, history have made of me," he once reflected. "But I am also much more than that. So are we all." In his final years, Baldwin received recognition as a kind of elder statesman of letters, and he continued to challenge America to reckon with its history and its soul. He died on the 1st of December 1987 at his home in France, succumbing to cancer at the age of 63. To this day, he is remembered as the boy from Harlem, born into a nation's painful contradictions, who used the power of words to hold up a mirror to America's face. James Baldwin never wanted to be a hero or a prophet. Never to be a spokesman, he said, but a witness. And by bearing witness, he proved that the telling of unvarnished truth can be a catalyst for change. In his own words, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." His life's work was to make America face itself, and though he did not live to see all the changes he fought for, his voice continues to light the way, challenging each new generation to confront the truths that can set us free.